Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be looking at the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program as a pathway to obtaining the Canadian permanent residence. So here we'll be talking about the requirements, the application process, what it takes, what it will require from you, the applicant, and how you can go about it. Now let's get into it. What you need to know about the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program is that it's a pathway, a different pathway that offers permanent residence for skilled foreign workers and international graduates who want to work and live in Canada. Now, this program is specifically for the four Atlantic provinces in Canada. It's an employer driven program, which means it's designed to help employers in Atlantic Canada hire qualified candidates for jobs they have been unable to find workers locally. Now, to partake in this pilot program, you need to have been a recent graduate of a public funded institution in Atlantic Canada or a skilled worker who meets the following requirements. Now, to know what the requirements are, you can either click here or just continue reading through. Now, if you're not already living in Canada, you must receive a job offer from a designated employer in Atlantic Canada to participate in this pilot. Now, when they say designated employer, these are specific employers that have gone through the process of vetting themselves and their companies as viable employers, and as such they have received the license or the permission to source for skilled workers from outside of Canada. Not all local employers are designated employers. Designated employers are the ones that have the permit to seek skilled labor from outside Canada. Now, as a designated employer in Atlantic Canada or in the Atlantic provinces in Canada, they are able to seek skilled labor from outside Canada. So, if you're interested in relocating to Canada and for one reason or another you could not meet up with the cutoff for the Federal Skilled Worker Program, this is another good pilot program and immigration route that you can take advantage of. The requirements here are a lot more relaxed compared to the Federal Skilled Worker. It requires less settlement funds, it requires less IELTS score, it requires less education. Basically, all requirements are relaxed compared to the Federal Skilled Worker Program. Now let's look at the requirements. Now, to understand the requirements, we must first understand that there are three different programs or three different sub-programs under the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program. First, to have the Atlantic International Graduate Program, I wouldn't focus on this because I know most of my viewers would be from Nigeria, and this particular program is for people who are already living in Canada. In fact, it's for people who are already living in the Atlantic provinces in Canada. So I wouldn't focus more on this. The Atlantic High Skilled Program, on the other hand, is a program that is open to all applicants, irrespective of where you live, whether in Canada or outside of Canada. So we'll be focusing a lot on this. We'll also look at the Atlantic Intermediate Skilled Program, which is also open to applicants from outside Canada. So let's get into it. Now, the Atlantic International Graduate Program, which is the first one, is a program that demands or that mandates that you must have schooled or lived in one of the Atlantic provinces for at least 16 months within the last 2 years. And this is basically for people who are already living in Canada or who school in Canada and would like to make their stay a permanent one. So people who currently live or school in Canada and would like to make their stay permanent. Now let's move on to the second one, which is the Atlantic High Skilled Program. Now let's look at eligibility. First, let's look at work experience. Now, for work experience in this particular pilot program, you need to have worked for at least 1 year within the last 3 years. And that 1 year, you must have worked for a minimum of 1,560 hours It's pretty much 30 hours per week. Or if you work Monday to Friday, you need to have worked for at least 6 hours every day. I don't think this would be a problem for most Nigerians. I know we work sometimes even 12 hours a day, so this shouldn't be a major problem. Now, note that this work must have been a job that has an NOC classification of skill type 0, A or B, which means it has to be a skilled work. Remember, your work experience must be under NOC classification skill type 0, A or B. Okay, just as I explained now, to calculate your work experience hours, you need to count the hours worked in part-time or full-time jobs. Now, this hour must be in one occupation. It doesn't matter if it's under different employers, but it must be one particular occupation. Now, you must have been paid for these hours of work. Volunteer work and unpaid internships do not count. Now, don't count hours when you were self-employed. You have to have worked for someone. Now, these working hours can be inside or outside Canada. It doesn't really matter. The hours must have been accumulated over a period of 12 months, which means this 1,560 hours must have been accumulated over a period of 12 months. Anything less makes ineligible. Next, let's move on to education. Minimum requirements as regards education for this Atlantic immigration program: you would need a Canadian secondary school or post-secondary school certificate, diploma or degree, or you need a foreign degree, diploma or certificate that is equal to a Canadian credential, which means you still have to do your ECA if you intend to apply through this Atlantic immigration pilot program. You can do your ECA with WES. I think they are the popular ones. Now to language. I'm going to assume most of you watching are going to be taking the English test and not the French test. So for language, you must take one of the language tests that are approved by the AIPP, that's the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program. Now the aim of this test is just to show that you can communicate in English or French well enough to live and work in Canada. Now, the minimum acceptable CLB for this particular program is CLB4. It's a lot more relaxed compared to the minimum requirement of CLB7 demanded in some other immigration programs. Now, if you've taken the test, like with all other immigration programs, your language test, be it IELTS or any other one, must be less than 2 years old. Now, for proof of funds, remember I said this particular program has a more relaxed proof of funds. Unlike the federal skilled worker that requires you to have a minimum of 12,000 plus Canadian dollars, here you need just 3,240 for a single person. If you're two, you need 4,034 Canadian dollars. If you're three, 4,959 Canadian dollars. If you're 4, 6,000. So you can go through the list to see which is applicable to you. If you're already living in Canada and working in Canada already, then you do not need this proof of funds. However, if you're applying from outside Canada, say Nigeria for instance, you would have to have this amount of money as proof of funds even though you'll be needing to get a job. And let's move on to the job. Remember, if you're already living in Canada, you do not need this proof of funds. But if you're outside Canada, these funds are supposed to help you settle in, pay maybe your rent for the first couple of months, help you feed and all that. Now to the job offer. Now to be eligible or to qualify for the AIPP, you need to get a valid job offer. Now, a valid job offer, for your job offer to be considered valid, it needs to meet all the requirements listed below. First, the job offer has to be made by an employer using the offer of employment to a foreign national form. This is the form. You can click here to download the form. But the form is really not for you. It's basically for your employer. But your employer needs to make the offer using this form. Secondly, the employer has to be a designated employer. The employer has been designated as an employer taking part in the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program. Just as I said earlier, not all employers are eligible, or not all employers are permitted to seek for labor outside of Canada. Only ones who are permitted to seek for labor outside of Canada are those known as designated employers, and you have to be from one of these 4 provinces here. Those are the Atlantic provinces, and those are the provinces where you would have to live and work if your application is approved. Then the job must be a full-time job, meaning you need to work for at least 30 paid hours every week. Next, the job must be non-seasonal. In general, this means you need to have a consistent and regular scheduled paid employment throughout the year. Now, the job has to fall under type 0, A, and B. Finally, the employer offering you this job must be willing to offer you the job for at least a year, which means the employer intends to employ you for a minimum of 1 year. These are the conditions that make a job offer valid. Anything short of that, your job offer will be considered invalid. Now, you must also meet the employment requirements for the job you are offered. These requirements can be found in the NOC, that is the classification. Go there and read up on classification, the job description, and the job responsibilities. It's very important, and it must be similar to what you are already doing or what you've done that you consider the work experience that made you eligible to apply for this program. Now, to submit your application, if you think you meet these requirements, if you've gotten the requirements and you intend to apply, here's how to go about the application. Now, when you and the employer have completed all steps, you can submit your application. To save time, you can start by filling your permanent residence application before all the steps are completed. Gather the documents that go with your application as soon as you can. So to get the forms needed, click here. It will take you to a page where you would find all the forms you need to fill. This is the official AIPP, the application for the Atlantic High Skilled Program. This is the official website. Now these are the forms you need to fill out. Here's a list of all the forms: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. These are the 9 forms that you need to fill out. Feel free to read everything on this page and follow the instructions to the letter. To pay your fees, here's where you need to pay your fees online. So that's that about the Atlantic Immigration Program using the second sub-program, that is the High Skilled Program. Now let's move on to the Atlantic Intermediate Skilled Program. Now, similarly to the High Skilled Program, the application process remains the same. The only difference is this particular program is for people whose NOC is skill type C. If your national occupational classification falls under skill type C, this is the Atlantic Immigration Program for you. That's for option 1, of course. Now, people under skill type C include the industrial butchers, the long haul truck drivers, the food and beverage servers. Also, under this particular Atlantic Intermediate Skilled Program, there's a straightforward application process if you're a registered nurse or a registered psychiatric nurse. So in registered nurse, your skill type falls under NOC skill type A, 3012 to be precise. And if you're a licensed practical nurse, it falls under 3233. If you have one of the following job offers: a nurse aide, orderly, or patient service associate, or as a home support worker, as under NOC skill type C. This is also skill type for caregivers. Now for education, just like the high skilled program, you need a minimum of a Canadian secondary school or post-secondary school certificate or its equivalent from another country, which means you still have to do your ECA. The language test has to be less than 2 years old, and the minimum of CLB4 is acceptable. Proof of funds: similar to the high skilled program, you need a minimum of 3,240 Canadian dollars, but you also need to have secured a job or need to have received a job offer. To submit your application, use this link here. It takes you to a different page than the one of the high skilled worker program. So that's that about the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program. Let me know if you have questions by commenting below. I would answer as much as I can when I can.